The book of James is just loaded with very practical observations about the nature of living faith in life and how our faith should characterize us. It should characterize our perspective in going through tough times, trials and tribulations. It should characterize our response to the vulnerable in society. It should characterize our passions and the priorities that we have. And one of the struggles that I have had in going through James, the book of James, but especially now as we come into chapter 5 and are preparing to wrap it up, is it's very easy as a pastor or a Bible teacher to play spiritual whack-a-mole. You know what whack-a-mole is? The game at the fair or at Canada's Wonderland where the little groundhog pops up and you take your mallet and you whack it and it pops up in a whole bunch of different holes and you're always trying to whack it down, gain points, and you win a prize. It's very possible for a pastor in the book of James to play spiritual whack-a-mole where an issue pops up, the vulnerable in society, so you whack that. And then the issue pops up of our perspective on money, so you whack that. And then the issue pops up of being joyful in trials, so you whack that. And it reduces the book of James, it reduces our understanding of the nature of our relationship with God to just a series of, on the best case scenario, a series of tips for better living. In the worst case scenario, whack on the head if you're all the moles that keep popping up through the holes in the table. And it can very quickly lose its larger perspective, its larger reality as an expression of what it means to walk with God. These are not just life hacks. This is how we do Psalm 67. This is how we represent Christ well, represent the kingdom well in the earth, so people will learn to fear the God that we worship. So I've wanted to avoid that whack-a-mole approach to the book of James and bring it down more to a level of looking at these as life skills that we acquire through practice over time. And any life skill that's worth having takes time to learn. It takes time, it takes practice and repetition. I wish I could sit down at the piano and play like a concert pianist. I can't. I don't even know where middle C is on the keyboard. I know there is a middle C, so that's a step forward. But you look at a concert pianist, they didn't get that way just by dreaming about it and watching YouTube videos. It represents years and years and years of work and of passion. As James wraps up his book, there is a slight change in tone from simply, contrasting the old with the new to now talking about passions. And what he is addressing specifically is very much aligned with what Jesus said. James was Jesus' half-brother. He was probably there to hear most of Jesus' sermons. And if he didn't hear it, he heard it from others because he was just part of that family group. I'm going to read this first section in James chapter 5, verses 1 to 6. Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming upon you. Your wealth is rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workmen who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourself in the day of the slaughter. You have condemned and murdered innocent men who were not opposing you. And there, if you read that carefully, you can almost hear Jesus in the parable that he told of the rich farmer who said, "Oh, look at my crops. They are so bountiful, I'm going to have to tear down my barns and build new barns to hold it all. And God says, you fool, this day your life is required of you. You can almost hear that in here. You can almost hear the Beatitudes. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in or steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And James is concerned that as this church goes through the transition process, they lose focus on the priority of their passions. That the function of that old thinking that they've had in the old system is now going to taint their new understanding of this new thing that Christ has established called the church. In the old system, everything was based on the physical manifestation of God's blessing. That demonstrated evidence that God was blessing. And what happened is that got twisted, and as people learned to tweak the system and cut corners and take advantage, as the human heart is prone to do, they justified themselves, even though someone was complaining, you're not paying your laborers. Well, yeah, I am, because look at how God's blessed me. Look at all I have accumulated. Clearly, the hand of God is blessing me. This obviously all has to come from God. Look at my wealth. And that ancient mindset had crept into the church, or perhaps it was still part of the culture. So James is not speaking against the problem of wealth. He's speaking about the problem of displaced passion. And the example he uses, whether it was real or whether it was just an example based on some of the illustrations in the Old Testament and Jesus' own preaching, is the people who are out working in the field and you do not give them a fair share. But the passion, if it's displaced, says the only way I am going to be successful, or the only way I'm going to make the next level of my dreams and my objectives, is to take things into my own hands. And even though there's that's supposed to be left there, I can increase my profit margin by 7.6% if I scoop all that. So I'm going to do that because it looks good on the books. And James says, no, you have hoarded your wealth and it's in vain. But it's interesting how he contextualizes this, because he calls it, you've hoarded your wealth in the last days. And this entire section, and then beginning in the next section, James changes his focus from the immediate to the future, to the eternal. And there's going to be that time, he says, when you're going to have to give account of your activities before God. Look at the verse 1. You wail, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming upon you, looking forward. Corrosion will testify against you, a future thing, and eat your flesh like fire. You've hoarded wealth in the last days. So there's this forward-looking thing. And then it says in verse 4, the cries of the harvester have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. And this phrase, Lord Almighty, is commonly used in context of God bringing judgment, holding people to account. So what James is trying to do, I think in echoing Jesus' teaching, is to remind them that your passion for today has got to be the passion for the kingdom that is to come tomorrow, someday into the future. And that's why Jesus said, where your heart is, your treasure will be also. And seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. That early church had this obsession. They didn't fully understand that the second coming of Christ was going to be delayed. They fully anticipated it would happen in their generation. They thought Jesus was coming back because he had made the comment to his disciples, before one of these disciples pass away, or before these things pass away, I will return. They understood that to mean like themselves. They didn't understand the nature of delay that was to come. And James isn't trying to explain that. He's simply going back to remind them that if you are going to follow after Jesus, it's not simply a matter of the spiritual whack-a-mole, where you make a list and you accomplish the right things, or you do the right things, or you live with the right characteristics, and that's what it means to follow Jesus. So you whack the moles. James is saying, no, it's an issue of your passion. Where is the passion that drives you? And in this example that he's using, the passion, even though these people claimed that they were following God or in a relationship with God, they were abusing their workers. They were garnishing their wealth on the backs of the common person who was working in their fields. And it says, the cries of the harvester have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourself in the day of slaughter. Great image, right? The fattened calf that is going to be offered in sacrifice. Well, you are the calf that's being fattened. You're getting yourself ready for the slaughter. And you have condemned and murdered innocent men who were not opposing you. So James is calling this church very simply to recall the words of Jesus. And in anticipation of the next section, where he's going to go back to some of the themes that we've already seen before, and he's going to talk about prayer, he's going to talk about confession of sin. He is setting the stage, I think, using money as an example, for pausing to evaluate what is my passion for the kingdom. Passion is, what is my motivation? Why am I following after Jesus? We know in the early days of the church, there were people that were very impressed by all that was happening, by the miraculous manifestations. And one guy, Simon, even approached Peter, or maybe it was Simeon, I'm not sure what his correct name is. And he said, I'm really impressed that you can raise people from the dead and heal people. Would you mind selling me some of your power? And so that has come to be known as simony in today's era. Would you sell me the access, your secret key to this power, so that I can share in it too? So what Christ has done, what he did in those early days, as we see in the book of Acts, was very impressive. What Christ is continuing to do in the process of transforming each one of us is very impressive. But it is a process that also changes not just who we are and the fact that we come to church on Sunday. It is a transformational process that changes our passions for the things of this world, for the things of the kingdom that is yet to come.